here from all over the place, including one domestic. I think that's what my note says. All right. First off, I guess, can you hear me? Can someone reply? Awesome. Okay, good. Great. All right, so we got 4. I'm looking for VibLab. I don't see VibLab. Have you seen VibLab in any of the other modules showing up to class? Does that sound familiar, that name? Or he could also be called Raoul Schambach. Have you seen Raoul Schambach? Oh, okay. So maybe in transit. All right. So maybe what I'll do is, I'm not supposed to, but what I'll do, just so you have reference and anyone who's not in the class has some reference to go back to. Since this is online, I'm going to record the class and you can go back and check stuff out, especially for instructions on the assignment or the 2 assignments. So I'll hit the record button soon. Maybe we might get a couple more to join us. Okay, so a very small, intimate class. That's great. See, why don't you tell me whereabouts, what countries are you guys joining us from? Oh, we got another one joining us. No answers? Anonymous country?
Hi, Blaine.
Hi.
Myself, Kiran. I'm from India.
Okay, great. Whereabouts in India?
I'm from Kerala.
You know what?
It's a
I've
southern part
been
of
to India, so I north, south, east, west. Yeah.
It's a southern part of India.
Ah, okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for answering. Anybody from anywhere else? Nigeria. Wow. Okay, cool. So we got people from all over the place. Mauritius Island. Oh my, that's cool. Clearly, I need to do more traveling. Anyways, we'll get started. Welcome to, because I'm going to be mostly talking about myself and the business that I'm in. And hopefully I do a good job of maybe convincing a couple of you after you're all said and done and you're finished the exercises, that maybe graphic design or advertising might be for you. Advertising agencies, especially the big ones, A-level shops, the biggest agency I've worked at is McLaren McCann and Ogilvy and Mather. Ogilvy and Mather has, or just Ogilvy now, or Ogilvy 2, the Ogilvy 1. Hello, Mumbai. And Ogilvy 1 or Ogilvy is pretty much everywhere in the world, right? So I believe they have offices in India. They have offices in small islands in the Pacific. Yep, there we go. So those kinds of places, right? And they kind of need graphic designers. They need art directors, and I'll explain what art directors do later. Writers, creative people, creative minds. Hello, Taiwan. Wow, cool. And they there's not always positions available. It really depends. Advertising agencies are like a puzzle. There's always pieces moving around. Different clients, they may win a piece of business and all of a sudden they need like 10 people. So it's a interesting dynamic business, and I'm a professional of this business for 30 years. So most of what I'm going to be trying to cover in this very short period of time with you is explaining kind of what the business is about. Now you've had, let's see, you've had, oh no, you haven't had media communications yet. So with Robin. Now Robin is your next teacher, and he's from an advertising background as well. Like he's worked at some pretty big shops in town. In Toronto is where I've pretty much been my whole career. There's a few agencies in the United States that I would have liked to have worked at, but I don't really like living in the US. I love visiting the US, but I don't like the idea of living in the US. But there's some really, really great advertising agencies that are very consistent. And if I had a chance as a young person before I kind of settled in and got my roots down, I would have loved to work at Wyden and Kennedy in Portland, Seattle. That place does phenomenal work consistently every year, and I'm sure I would have learned a lot. So there's a lot of learning in this business. There's a lot of stuff that I did not know when I started out. So I'll touch upon a couple of things, and then by the end of it, I hope maybe some of you might be interested in following up. So joining the media department and studying how to, make your way through Adobe programs. Perhaps there's a few of you that already know how to do some of that. Schools these days are introducing you to Adobe a lot earlier than when I was introduced to it. And we may be already advanced and can like maybe try a more, call it a shorter program. Okay, so in my opinion, to become a good art director or designer, I think you really do need a solid 2-year foundation minimum, right? Now, if you're advanced in Adobe, all Adobe like programs, and you know your way around all of those already, then maybe you might be able to get into a post-grad program where it's 1 year and you're just basically cramming in as much as you can in that 1 year and get yourself a whatever that, I don't know if it's a diploma or a degree. Don't quote me on this because I'm a partial low teacher. I'm a part-time teacher and I'm a freelancer. So I've got my own business, I got my own clients, and in between that, I give back and do this for students at Humber. And with all my years of experience, what I do is bring projects in to the school, which is in the winter program. So if I convince some of you that, hey, I really like the sound of advertising and graphic design, I may see your face again or your name in my winter class. So in the winter, I teach a program called campaign development. So it's called 256 It's in the graphic design and art direction part of the school, and we take art directors and writers and give you a world, like real client experience. Okay, so I'll give a call to one of my acquaintances or someone I've known in the business for a long time and say, hey, Peter, the students want to sink their teeth into a real project. What do you got for us? And Peter will say, yeah, sure. I'll set you up with Alex from Montreal, and he's the creative director on McDonald's, and we're going to give you guys a project to do on McDonald's. Okay. And then everybody competes against each other. And we got 5 spots, and we produce 5 spots to do final presentations to the client. So you'd be in front of like the creative director from Montreal, Alex. You'd be in front of the heads account supervisor and maybe the account director. And then you all get to present to them your great idea or your big idea. And it's usually a full-blown campaign, starting off with print, traditional medium, that is how to explain or best understand your idea. And then you get to fill in all the blanks afterwards, which is basically as many 360, 360-degree medias that are of today. So whatever that might be, could be a PR stunt, could be hiring some ambassadors on social media channel for sure, a retail thing, an in-store thing, and all of these things add up to a campaign, right? And McDonald's, one of the biggest clients in the world, never mind Canada, and that's kind of how they dole out their businesses. They kind of like, they understand the differences of cultures and the way people think. So they'll hire an agency somewhere in the world that's best suited for that area. Okay, so maybe an agency in Hong Kong best knows the culture locally, and that's what they specialize in. That's what they'll give their business to. Well, they'll get them to pitch it, not right. We're always competing for business in the advertising world, always. Right, you're losing a client, you're gaining a client, you're losing clients, so like a lot of moving parts. In Canada, Cassette is the agency that works on McDonald's. So Cassette is in every city across Canada, and they have an agency pretty much in every main city. And my acquaintance and contact is Peter Ignazi. He's the Chief Creative Officer of all of Canada. So no matter what goes through the office creatively, he provides a consultation on it, right? So nothing goes out of the office without his approval. So that's a lot of projects to supervise. And then all the people, you know, do we need to have a new hire in the Montreal office? Oh, I don't like what Alex is doing. Let's find a new creative director. Or the client has an issue with somebody personally. They don't think they're doing a good job. And then Peter's got to fill that position. So that's like we'll talk about on the creative side, that's the highest position in the advertising industry, is like a chief creative officer. No, I haven't started recording. So the most important part of the recording is going to be the instructions of the assignment. So I'll do that in a second. Thank you for reminding me, though. Okay, so yeah, so that's kind of what I do as an advertising person and giving back to the industry. I had an amazing teacher at OCAD who kind of gave me the idea of doing this in the first place, right? He was like, I guess you'd probably say the one who helped me the most and made me see that I was really good at it, and therefore I specialized in it. And next thing you know, I had a portfolio that was all about it. And then I went out 2 weeks after graduating from OCAD, which is one of our other art colleges in the city downtown, and had a job within a couple of weeks. Okay, so let me start recording. So I don't think anyone else is going to probably be joining us. We're supposed to have, let's see, you're supposed to have, that's awesome looking word. Okay, cool. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. You're supposed to have 13. Okay, so let me start recording because I'm going to say something very important that every student should hear or be able to have access to. Recording now. Awesome. Okay, so talking a little bit about the assignments, I'll go back to talking about me, blah, 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 and tell you a little bit about how I got into this business in the first place. Like, how did I know advertising was my thing? And I'll talk a bit about the school and the process and all that. Because you're all on a journey, right? You're not quite sure what you want to do. And that's the point of all these modules, is to give you a taste of a bunch of little things in media. All right. Like maybe you're a really good PR person. You know how people tick. Perhaps you've got a 30,000 person following on Instagram or on a social media network, and you do food reviews and you travel and who knows what it is that you do that attracts that attention. But you seem to know and understand what people dig and want to read and listen to, and what kind of stories you tell. Like maybe that's your thing. So perhaps PR, you have a way better understanding of that. Now, you still have to be very creative in the PR business. It's not about delivering those specific things that I'm talking about. It still involves a creative idea to get people on board with public, like with a public relations message, right? So it's basically, you're like the catalyst between the customer, and you have a product or a service that you need to get in the middle of, and you're the catalyst between the client and the customer who's buying stuff, and you're trying to make whatever idea or selling proposition that might be coming from the client, or problem, right? So you're H&M, and you've got a whole bunch of publicity that's bad about too many dyes, and the process of making your fashions are too fast fashion, bad thing, and you need to make H&M look good. Okay, so that's a very specific thing that you're learning how to do. Then there's journalism, which doesn't look like you've touched yet, which is about getting down to facts and telling stories. It's still a story. We're all kind of telling stories in a way. We're all trying to get attention from stories. Now, sometimes things in journalism are not that interesting, but when a journalist digs really deep and they find something that's not clear, and you find the truth about it, that can be a really interesting story to tell, and you want to listen to it, right? So it's all media, right? We're all manipulating and creating stories that people want to listen to. Okay, and in my business, advertising, I really think, in my opinion, advertising is an interruption in your life, right? You're going on to YouTube, you need to figure out how to fix your lawnmower or something. I don't know what, want to go look at cat videos, whatever it is. The way YouTube is set up to make money, they have to pre-roll things either during, while it's playing, and they're all interruptions, right? It's like, I just want to know how to fix the lawnmower, and then I've got this really bad ad that's interrupting my space, and then I'm going to hit the skip button as fast as I can. We're in the business of trying not to do that. We want you to watch our ads. So for me, and what I always tell my clients is, if we're going to interrupt somebody's life with an ad, I think our main goal is, if we're not informative, if we're not telling something to someone that's very important, perhaps life-threatening, or if we're not behind some kind of cause, like a political cause or a public service to let you know about something that's very important going on, like environmental change or climate change, then we need to be entertaining. So no matter what it is that we are working on, whether it's in a social media platform or a traditional commercial that's during a sports streaming event, right? So you're watching your favorite sports and they have to stream an ad, and there's media around that, like media buying around that before you get to watch an ad, or while you're watching the actual soccer game, there's an ad. So if that's going to interrupt your favorite sport, it better be good. It's something to watch that is entertaining. Okay, so that's what I think advertising is supposed to be. And again, that's like a very specific kind of detail about it, but that's what I try to do. Okay, so if I'm doing an ad for a client and building a campaign, I can't always be entertaining, especially something heavy-handed in retail or something that's coming from a bank, but there are good bank ads out there. Sometimes you'll see a bank ad and there's like a celebrity in it, and the celebrity is very captivating and interesting and they're funny, and you're kind of like in between things and you're a little bit bored and you're like just looking at something. And if something's entertaining, you'll actually listen to it, or at least retain it or remember it. Okay, so that's also important in the advertising business or in the media business altogether, is you want to be remembered and you want to be talked about. Okay, sometimes even negatively. So if I'm not being talked about, I'm being ignored. And what client wants to be ignored unless they need 3 months to figure out what it is they want to do, and they'd rather be ignored for 3 months because all the media attention is negative about them, right? So there's sometimes the best way to deal with a problem is to ignore it. Because if you put any twigs on something that's bad, you're just going to add fuel to the fire and make it worse. Right? I had to teach that to one of my class coordinators, where we had some issues with some students, and I told her, I said, the number one rule in the business is, if there's something bad going on, you need to perhaps not put any more fire on it, right? Like, even though maybe the students are not right, or they're wrong in this case, we don't really want to add any more fuel to it. Let's let it kind of settle out for a few days. Maybe it'll resolve itself, but we still have to not ignore it, but we have to address it. But that's like the magic of PR, is the right timing, right? So, and advertising too, it's the right timing. When is a campaign perfect? Okay, so if one of you guys is like picking a cause for your team, and in November, there's a cause in Canada or North America or the world for that sake, you may not be familiar with it because you're from different places in the world, is in November, one of the, I guess, biggest public service social good things that a charity is doing for awareness is Movember. Okay, so if you're not familiar with Movember, during that month, men usually grow a beard to raise money for cancer research and men's mental wellness, all those things. So there's a month of that. So what kind of campaign do we need to time something like that, right? Like, so we need to address it and deal with it for every time of that year. So in probably August or September, you might be doing some planning on, okay, what's the best campaign this year for the agency to work on for Movember. But you guys get to decide that. So in assignment 2, not assignment 1, because assignment 1 is pretty basic introduction of what it is that we do. You get to do some research, right? So nobody in the advertising industry or the graphic design industry works on anything without a formal brief. Okay, so traditionally a piece of paper that's handed to you in a boardroom while you're having a meeting, or a digital file that's given to you while you have a Zoom meeting. It really depends whether you're doing in-person meetings or still doing Zoom calls. I find myself still doing a lot of Zoom calls, because we like to think the pandemic is over, but it's not. We've got different varieties of COVID. They keep mutating, and we have vaccinations that we keep updating, and it's still going around. But I guess the good news is there's a little less hospitalization than there was before, but it's still there. So no corporation, no advertising agency wants to put their employees at risk. So you know what? We got so used to doing this Zoom thing, we're going to do more of it, and we'll have less boardrooms to have to book and less meetings around tables. So we're going to do meetings around notebooks instead. Does it really matter? In my experience, there's a little bit of spontaneity that kind of gets lost when you're like sitting down with somebody and a conversation might have started before you even get into the meeting, and then it might lead to a better way or a better solution for something. But I guess that's the part I might miss the most. But there's some agencies that do still do that, right? Like they really don't care. Every employee kind of deals with it in a different way. Maybe you have a smaller meeting. Maybe some will be online and some will be in the meeting, and it'll be a mixed bag. It's like whatever someone's comfort level. So we all figured out how to like live with it and move on and do the things we still need to do for our clients in the best way. Okay. All right. So in assignment 2, you get to decide what that is. So in your team, whether you do it in a chat session or a FaceTime session or emails, or you guys manage how you want to manage your team, right? Now that, let's see, Raul Shambuk, or other known as Viblav. I see you joined us, Viblav. Welcome.
Hello, Blaine. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Where are you from?
I'm from Delhi, India.
Ah, Delhi. So are you, it looks like we got a few that are on the same time zone. Are you okay about working on your own?
I think I'll go with Srija.
Which team number is that? Oh, team 3?
Yeah.
Team 3. And is Srija here? Yeah, there you are. So Srija and Natalie. Let's see, Natalie's not here. Okay. So, all right. Sounds like a plan. So we're going to stick Viblav into team 3. All right.
Great. Thank you.
Good. That's great. That'll leave us with 6 presentations to do next week. And hopefully you can divide up the work and share ideas and collaborate and get to a good spot.
Yes.
So don't be overwhelmed by the example that's been shown. That's just a high standard from a team last year or 2 years ago. It could be 2 years ago. It might have been that long. They did a really good job of comping up their ads and making things look pretty slick. So that's like I guess the best outcome you could have as a team is like a really slick looking poster for a transit shelter. And that's in assignment 2. But if all you can do is a nice sketch or drawing, and then bring your drawing into any program, whether it's Photoshop or even Word for that matter, and find some typefaces to stick in, your messages are clear and easy to understand and be able to read, and you've got a logo from the charity that you're picking, and a call to action that I can understand, then that's good enough. And then if you can produce another poster that's the campaign of it, so it's another execution of the same idea, and you can develop a campaign message rather than just a one-off visual on only one poster, you won't get as many marks as you will if you produced a campaign like the example that's been shown. And I'll get into the actual examples of what it is that you're working on and go into the nitty-gritty of each assignment after I kind of do the formal introduction of the business and show you a little bit of some work that I'm proud of, okay? some more understanding of the industry, okay, and what kind of fun you could have and what you get to do as an art director to attract you maybe into this business. Okay, so all good. So we've got our teams worked out. Anybody having any issues with reaching out to team members yet? Or haven't started? Because it's really important that you have some dialogue, right? Like in my instructions from the announcement, 24 hours, I'd say. If you do not hear from a member within 24 hours, then chances are you're probably working on your own, okay? So don't wait too long. You can wait a little longer for the second assignment because you're probably going to need a little more help dividing up workload for the second one, because the first one's pretty easy. But you don't want to like wait around 3 days for no contact from someone when you actually have time in your personal schedule, in your school schedule, to get some work done. So you decide, but I'd say 24 hours is probably a good enough period of time to go gone by before you should just kind of like do it on your own. And then maybe wait another day, another 24 hours for the second assignment before you kind of start sinking your teeth into that. But luckily in this group, this small intimate group that we have, there's probably time to add, more individual assignments because it's not so big. So sometimes I have a class of 36 and there's no way in 2 hours and 40 minutes we can present like 18 teams, like there's not enough time. So your presentation for next week is probably 10 minutes is probably the max you kind of want to spend with us on going through your slides and going through your sketches and your actual idea, selling us on the why you picked why did you pick this charity? Why is it important to you? And why should we care as individuals on the planet? Perhaps it's climate change you want to talk about, fast fashion, right? Which I brought up as a subject matter. Movember for the dudes mental health. You guys decide to pick whatever it is. Now, on my assignment sheet, I've said that it'd be great if you picked a Canadian charity, because then at least I kind of recognize it. But if you pick, I don't know, something like Red Cross, at least that's international, like it's around the world. Is it UNICEF? You want to focus on children's well-being in your own country, and there's probably no bigger organization that's working on that than UNICEF. You kind of decide what's most important to you. Perhaps it's cancer awareness, but you need to have an organization. So who's raising the most money and providing that kind of service in your own country, right? That's on a big scale. Like if you pick some kind of small group that's only collecting money for like a flood, for example. I know, was it Pakistan that got hit really hard with the flooding? Is flood relief? Is there a big organization? I'd say it's still Red Cross for me is probably the biggest one, right? Like I think that's where the Canadian government, if they're going to help out Pakistan, they're going to like drop some millions of dollars at Red Cross to like help out with rescue and food and mosquito nets or whatever it is that they need to do to help people out. You decide what that is. Perhaps you're coming from a country where there's too many homeless dogs on the street, and there's an organization that is doing really good work on that. You want to bring more awareness to the group. So think about assignment 2 as an opportunity to sell someone here in your group, or sell another team member from another class, because if you set new standards and your presentation is in my collection of best presentations of all time, then I'll use it. And when I'm using it, they're reading it. And of course, if you do a good job of selling what it is you think is important, then they might have somebody like a parent. I remember a student who had unusual amounts of wealth attached to their family. And if there's anyone in the world that could help with a big donation, it would be their family. So that's kind of maybe what your end goal is, to actually provide some help for the charity, right? So if there's someone watching or listening and they want a big tax receipt for their taxes this year and they want to donate $1 million, I don't know what the situation might be, or even $1. Every little bit counts, right? And it can make a difference especially in a charity, right? So that's kind of what you would be aiming to do. We'll get into that nitty-gritty in a bit. Okay, so let's get back to some of the fun stuff, because sometimes those social good causes are a little heavy-handed. They also can be fun. Okay, so that's probably the hardest thing to do for a serious topic in our business, and every creative person in this business tries their hardest at trying to be entertaining, and sometimes funny is way better than being serious about a subject matter. Okay, now there's some subject matters you don't really want to make fun of, right? So you kind of have to decide our own brand first. Can we select our own brand for the assignment? If you're talking about assignment 1, which I'll get into once I'm done this lecture portion or introduction. I hate to call it a lecture. A lecture sounds like something nobody wants to listen to. But if you're talking about the first assignment, you're picking if your brand is 10 years old and you've established a selling proposition, maybe you could do that. Okay, but if you're running a corporation and you're making lots of money, I say, why are you here? Why are you in this class introduction? Exactly. Okay, so let's stay away from that. So yeah, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of each assignment, so that's clear, and it'll be recorded, and you can all go back and take a look at it if you need to have more clarity or listen to something again because you didn't quite understand it. So we'll do that, but first let's get into the fun stuff. Okay, so what kind of fun can you have in the ad business? Well, where I'm about to go is to show you a piece, a TV commercial again, and we're looking at something old here, very traditional media buy, which is a commercial. And I think most of the big brands out there, like McDonald's, or a brand that maybe you're familiar with, maybe it's something as simple as a cookie. Somebody from India presented a cookie commercial that they thought was really good, and I watched it, and it wasn't necessarily that good to me, but it was clearly good to the culture, and it was very successful, and it had some silly number like 15 million views on YouTube. I went, okay, well, I'm sorry, I don't have anything that has that much traction. So clearly this ad works in a different way than any ads that I normally work on. But it was interesting to watch it and look at it and understand it. But pretty much all big clients, Nike, all the sports athletic companies, you name it, the big players out there will probably have, even now on YouTube, if you researched Nike commercial on YouTube, you would get all the best Nike commercials to look at, right? So do a little research when you're looking at the client that you picked in your team for assignment 1. You can't use Nike because that's the answers that are all given to you in the example, and I'll go through that. I'll go through that after in more detail. But first thing that you're going to do as a team is figure out what's the brand we want to work on. Is it a fashion brand? Is it high-end fashion? Is it like Uniqlo? Who is it that you would like to do some research on? And you're going to answer all those questions, and then you'll get to a very, very important question, which I'll talk about again in detail later. And then the fun part is going to be designing your own logo. Okay. And when I talk about own logo, your own team logo, and it's not a logo about your favorite thing to do or a new music search app that you want to start. It has nothing to do with what you like. It's what you think is a good name for your team and a good logo for a communication, advertising, or design firm. Okay, so you don't have to be literal about it. It can be fun, but whatever you think could attract a client or make a really good creative idea from your team and what it is that you're doing for the class in the next 2 weeks, right? Or maybe one day you'll start your own advertising firm or a graphic design firm. So that's the goal. In the part B of assignment 1 is to do a little graphic design of your own. Okay, so that's like the getting to draw and conceptualize. And what's most important there is rationalizing your design. Okay, so the big difference between good communicators, and that's what I am, consider myself a visual communicator. One of my students from Humber graduated last year, Andrew. Andrew sent out a thank you in the last month about his success because as a graduate of Humber, he had a good portfolio and he found himself working at a big agency called Gray and entered a bunch of awards with some of the work he's been doing and was winning. And he got, what was his status? I think, I can't remember which award show, but there was a platform that voted him top 15 visual communicator in the world. And I was like, whoa, dude, that's pretty cool. So there you go, having some big successes after getting out of Humber. Now, he was really good conceptualizer. I was on his rear end all the time about his executions, right? Executions, you need to spend more time on execution. You're such a smart person and you have great ideas, but when it comes to the part of executing your ads and your communications, they're kind of sloppy and they need to be tighter and they need to be better. And he was like always appreciative of the criticism. I won't call it criticism, but encouragement. And he said, I will do that moving forward, right? But he won one of the competitions that I do for my campaign development class, right? Got in the top 3 after one of the, we do 2 of these things. So I've got 2 clients I usually bring in for the term. And he won one of those. Okay, so that kind of gives you the level of what kind of work he was doing at the school. So already succeeding at the school. So probably a good indicator of how well you're doing, right? So if you're not, maybe the industry isn't quite suited or right for you, okay? It doesn't mean that it couldn't happen one day. It doesn't mean that if you try harder or work harder or get more work or always develop on your portfolio and always be building, that it won't happen eventually, but it was already happening for him, right? So it doesn't, the story doesn't always, the journey never really goes that straight. It's sometimes takes some people a whole year to get a job in the industry, right? And it really depends on where you land, what successes you have when you land. There's a lot of rejection in this business. So if you don't like rejection, that's kind of, you need to be able to swallow your pride and be able to work hard and get to a solution that maybe that needs to sell. Like it's something the client wants, it's something the creative director wants. It may not be necessarily what you want. To give you a good idea of that, and I was like overwhelmed by this when I saw it for myself. When I was working at Ogilvy and made their full-time at Toronto office. Ogilvy in New York City has American Express. I don't know if you're not familiar with American Express. It's a credit card, one of North America's biggest credit cards, unlike MasterCard or Visa card. And the office for Ogilvy, when I visited New York City, one of the skyscrapers in Manhattan, it was 4 floors of this building was exclusively for American Express. Like that was the amount of service they needed for that client. And in the Ogilvy office, we only have, like, there's me, my partner, and maybe one other team that kind of works on American Express. And then there's a bunch of satellite offices that are doing some of the main course stuff, like from London, England. But there was 400 people, creatives, working on the brand in the USA, so in New York City. Now, what am I doing in New York? Well, I was asked to come to New York with my partner. So in an advertising agency, there's a writer and there's an art director, and you work together in teams. And that's kind of why I kind of split you up into teams. This is a very collaborative business, right? We work together, and you have to learn how to work together. So it's an important thing to learn as a skill, right? Is how do I navigate my way around people? How do I sell things? How do I be heard? Make sure my idea survives. Like all those things is learning. So here I am. We get called in, and the only reason we got called in was because the 400 people or so that worked on the business couldn't come up with a script that the client wanted. Okay, so if you can imagine 400 people on, let's use something old school, typewriters, keyboards, clicking away for days and days, and maybe months, and there's nobody solving the problem at hand. The client gets antsy, and when the client gets antsy, you don't want a client to leave and go to another big agency with their business and their millions and millions of dollars worth of fees. So pressure is on. Ogilvy, because it has offices all around the world, would start reaching out to their satellite offices and say, we need some help writing scripts. So my partner and I got on a plane. We went to New York City. We got checked in at a hotel, and we went to some really nice restaurants. We hung out at some cafes, and we just went to work. Tickety-tickety-doo. So if you can imagine how many scripts were produced in that amount of time that were rejected, okay, so crumpled up and thrown in trash, gone through many creative directors' channels and gone to the client 100 times, and nothing is getting done and nothing's getting produced. And the media choice is not going away. So they have a commercial for 60 seconds they need to air during a certain particular time of the year, and it's not happening. And everything's getting rejected. Well, it's time to pull in everybody, all our sources. So let's get some of the Canadians down here. So we were free, right? It wasn't because my partner and I are the ones that are going to be chosen to do this because we're so bloody good. No, it was, we're free. We don't have a lot on our plate. Let's send them down there and see what they can do. So we go down, we work, type out 20 scripts, go see the creative director. Don't hear back from him, fly back to Toronto, and next thing you know, one of our scripts gets bought. And it's not a good script, but it's a fun script. So this is the first time I got to experience what we in the industry call a globetrotting event, right? We had so many different scenes from so many different places in the US. We were basically booking hotels and traveling all the time to get a 60-second commercial done that needed a whole lot of vignettes And a vignette is like a scene, right? Where it's something special needs to happen in the scene, and it's all put together in 60 seconds. So one day we're in Charlotte town. One day we're in New York City. Of course, we're working in New York City. It's not a big deal. Next thing you know, we're taking a crew down to the Florida Keys, and we're shooting off a 45-foot sailboat in the water with a really good crew and a good director. And it's all beautiful and fun and great, right? Like for an experience, it was just great. In the end, not an entertaining spot, a pretty spot, a very American Express-like spot, but it solved the client's problem. Okay, so that's what we do in this business, is we solve clients' communication problems. What do you need to communicate? And you really need a customer, potential customer, to understand and want, and then want to be part of that club or purchase or consider purchasing an American Express card in the future, or signing up for one. You don't really buy one, right? It's a service. Do I need this card or don't I need this card? I'm missing out because there's all this stuff that's going on in the world, and I want a life like that. I want that kind of card. Okay, so that's kind of what could happen. And if that's not in your nature, and it can happen for a graphic designer too, right? Like you can work on, let's say you're working at a big firm like Landor Finch at a London, England. Okay, you managed to land yourself a job there as a graphic designer, and you're working on a pitch for the next Olympic Games, the whole look and feel and all the corporate branding and things that are needed, the logo designs, you know, the way the stadium is going to look, a few events that go with that. There's a whole PR crew at your agency that's helping you out with this big pitch, and you want to land the next Olympic Games. There's going to be a lot of rejection. Okay, it's not the first thing that comes up. The first idea comes to your mind, and whatever sketches you come up with, and you may be working on your own, not necessarily in a team. Graphic designers work more independently than art directors do, and I'll explain what the difference between an art director and graphic designer are as well as we go along. Two very different things, even though some graphic designers at a high-end shop would be maybe doing some of the same things that an art director does. But on a mid-level shop or in a studio within an advertising agency, a graphic designer distinctively does something different. Okay, art directors are more idea people. Graphic designers are more designers. The look, right? The look of something is more of what a graphic designer does, versus the art director is also in control and responsible for the look, but the idea as well. Okay, so good visual communicator like Andrew, voted 15th best in the world, but also good at the idea needed all around the visual communication, right? So you're still communicating something visually, but the idea to get there is more, and art directors get paid more. Generally speaking, in the world, advertising art directors get paid more money than a graphic designer does. So there's kind of the difference. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to share a couple of slides. Talked a lot about stuff already that I'll probably skip through the slides because I'm kind of like talking to you without the visual support. And then I'll get into how I and a team member, Andy, my partner, the writer, right? So the writer is this. So this commercial I'm about to show you, the writer is more responsible for what's being said. Okay, so if you think about the announcer copy that you're going to hear in the commercial, all the words are written by a writer. Okay, so I get to maybe weigh in on, well, I think that's a bit cheesy. Can you rewrite that or say something more like this? And then the writer might consider it. Again, it's a collaborative effort. So in advertising, a writer and an art director they're like a married couple. Okay, if you do not find the right partner in the business, you will not do well. Okay, so at some point in time, Andrew, who's the 15th best visual communicator, is going to find a writer to work with, and he needs to make sure he gets a very good, solid relationship, because you trust this person, they trust you, and if you're not around, they trust that you'll probably be able to sell something if you went to a meeting and you had a presentation to go to, because things are stretched thin and you can't be together all the time, and one person's going to go off and do this. Perhaps you'll have the same experience where maybe a team member has an emergency and they can't make our presentation next week, and you're going to be doing it all yourself. It's like you kind of like trust that person to deliver the goods, right? And like being married, it's not always smooth. You could get into a bit of a tussle or an argument about something because you believe in something and they believe in something. But at some point you come to an agreement and a compromise and things get done. So that relationship is very important for a longevity in the business. So if you have a partner that's having mental disabilities or mental issues that can affect your team, right? A substance abuse can affect your team. There's lots of things that can affect a person. It's important to have a really good, healthy one. And usually translates into a long-term thing. So Peter Ignazi, the creative director of Cassette, he had a partner for a very long time named Carlos Morano. And Carlos has his own agency now. Obviously couldn't convince Peter to jump the ship and go with him. I'm sure he tried. But Peter, I think he doesn't like all the work that goes with starting his own agency. So he probably likes the idea of running the ship for a big corporation. And once he's done his job, he wants to go home and leave the job somewhere else rather than having to worry about every single thing, because everything is yours, right? So it's like, if I don't do this, then this might happen, or I'm responsible for the salaries of 40 people. And if we lose this piece of business, it's like there's a lot of extra stress. But of course, the rewards are much greater. If you have your own agency, the rewards are much greater in the end, right? So you could get bought out by Ogilvy and Mather, for example, and they'll just pay you out, give you what the company is worth, and in some cases, millions of dollars. And that's like a good cash cow for retirement or doing something else in life, you know. So all that hard work can lead to a nice nest egg. Doesn't happen for everyone. And I'll talk a little bit about that too. Like, what's your base salary? You know, so some of you may think money is important. So what's the entry level amount of money that you would make as an advertising person? And then what's the most you could possibly make in this business as like a Peter Ignazi? And of course, there's the whole freelance side of the equation, right? So if you're working for yourself and you're working at all these agencies, putting out fires is kind of what I do. As an older person, you're going in to solve something that someone else can't solve, right? So what's the point of bringing in another person and paying them if you can't, like, if you could do it yourself, you would. So maybe there's a time crunch. They only have 2 weeks to do something. Their teams are all like loaded up and they're doing their own things with their own clients, and they're like pitching something. Usually freelance, you come in to do pitches. It's like, okay, we got 2 weeks and we need to put a pitch together for this particular business. We want to try and win it. Okay, so we need you, because you have your experience and all the people you know, to like, let's do the best job we can with this. We'll pay you X dollars, and you go in, you do the work, and then you're gone. You're moving on to another agency. What I miss the most about a full-time position is every single detail you're in control of. Whereas a freelancer, you might like do a pitch, it wins, and then you're not touching the stuff and you're not executing it. Okay, you're moving on to another pitch and doing something else. All of a sudden your idea kind of changes because someone else has got a different visual, a different visualization of what it should be, and it can translate very differently. Okay. The same thing if you were to pick a director for a film or a story that you want to come to life, right? If you're a writer and you wrote a story and you want a director to direct it for you, because you're not much of a director yourself, is it depending on what director you pick can really change the outcome of how the story is told, right? So that's kind of what can happen here. All right, so let's get into this. All right, let's share a screen. You don't have to look at me anymore. Why teammate will go to Canada tomorrow? Oh, sorry, I missed that part of the conversation. Oh, your teammate. In transit, okay, so might make it difficult to get some work done, right? So either wait for them or you don't, or have them, maybe they, in this case, because they're traveling and they're not available, maybe you both hand in your own assignment. You can decide that amongst yourselves, what you're going to do. Okay, let's share screen. Sorry, I'm not going to make this full screen. Oh, wait, I'm not going to do it this way. I forgot. The best way to show this is actually embedded in Blackboard, because there won't be any visual audio blips, okay? I don't know what it is about on Blackboard, but sharing video content with you, for some reason, Wi-Fi or bandwidth, you never get to see something properly when I'm referencing something. So if I show you a clip from YouTube and it doesn't quite play right, then what I'll do is I'll copy and paste the link and stick it in the chat session for you, and you can click and watch it on your own at your own time. If you really wanted to see it. If you don't want to see it, it's up to you. Okay, so this is your module, add and graph, right? You've done PR, you've done ADMC. You'll be moving on to Robin when you're done with me. Unless you've done Robin already and we've changed order. It looks like there's a few visible things. I don't know what is this doing in his. He's got 1 and 2. Anyways, let's go into what we have. So week 1 is where you want to go to find your stuff if you haven't done that already. There's your team list, OMB team list. Okay, so feel free to reach out. If your teammate's not here in class, you need to reach out to them, see if the email works. Don't forget to use a course message right up here. Click on messages. Type in their name, it'll pop up in the window. And you can also click the email box in there and it'll send them an email and a course message. So you're getting them in both ways. So there's no excuse for them not to return an email or it's a course message, because you got them both ways. And if they posted a wrong email address in their Humber banner, my Humber, and they put a different one in Blackboard, these are things that can happen, right? So do your best at trying to make contact. But like I said, 24 hours, boom, you got to make a decision because you got to get work done. You might as well just say, hey, and always let them know what you're doing, okay? So be respectful of your teammate. Just say, hey, I haven't heard from you in 24 hours. My instructions are from the teacher to do my own assignments, so you should probably do your own, right? Let them know what you're doing so that they know what they're responsible for. Right? So if you're doing your own, they need to know that they're doing their own so they can find the time to do it. Okay, so I didn't put this in the right order. Okay, so here's your assignment 1. We're going to look at that after the lecture, but let's go to this. And I'm using this to describe Can I change the size of this? Why is this so small? I'll go full screen once I start playing it, but let's just get a visual going here. Okay, so I can talk about jam. Okay, so if you don't know what General Motors is, it's quite possible, depending on where you are in the world. Well, General Motors is supposed to be one of the world's biggest car manufacturers. At least that's what it's been doing as far as I ever remember it. And when I worked at McLaren McCann, General Motors gave my team, or they didn't specifically, but our creative director gave our team the responsibility, along with another team, to come up with a 60-second commercial that was going to air for Saturday night hockey night in Canada. Okay, so what's hockey night in Canada? So on Saturday, hockey night in Canada is probably the most visible thing. Okay, so I don't know what the most visible sports event is in your country, you know, whether it's soccer or cricket, but one night during the week is kind of like where most Canadians are watching hockey. Okay, so their city hockey team, and in my case, my parents were watching the Edmonton Oilers, home of Wayne Gretzky. And the Oilers have historically have won a lot of Stanley Cups. Okay, so that's like the best of the NHL. So winning a Stanley Cup is like the goal. So it's very competitive, you know, like city against city, you know, Calgary and Edmonton and Alberta, and this is where I'm from. I'm from Alberta. How did an Alberta boy from the country get to Toronto, the big city in Canada and Ontario, and then become an advertising art director? It's a big, long trip to take. I'll try and shorthand that because that may not be that interesting, but it helps with the journey. So if you have a journey and you haven't quite figured out what it is, perhaps my journey might help you with your journey. So that's kind of why I talk about it is. So here's this little, here's this, you know, kid from small town St. Albert, Alberta. And by the way, St. Albert is also a town where a lot of the Edmonton Oilers who won the Stanley Cup came from in the 80s, no, late 80s or 90s, early 90s. I think that's kind of when they had this run of Stanley Cups, and Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier and all these other people. Okay, probably don't know any of those people. So small town. In high school, starting to think about what it is that I need to do for a living. My dad is trying to help me navigate, like trying to be a good dad and navigate me to some early, you know, learning of what it is that he does, and maybe might be something I would consider. So my dad was an instrument mechanic, a captain in the Canadian Air Force, and he managed a group of people, a crew that serviced all the Hercules planes. So, you know, those cargo planes you see in the movies where the back door opens in the air and then stuff gets dropped out. They do, actually, they probably do a lot of drops for the Red Cross, for helping out other countries where they'll drop food supplies in the middle of a field with the parachute, and that's like a Hercules. So Dad serviced those planes to make sure that they're always running well and running safe, and all the instrumentation on the plane needs mechanics, engineers, etc. So that's what he did. And he was a very technical guy. He's very good at reading manuals like this thick, you know, and remembering everything. So a very specific talent. It bored the crap out of me, so I had to admit that. And he wanted me to go to a place called Saint, which is a Canadian, or sorry, Alberta Technical Institute, learning instrumentation technology. And I'm like, no, please, it's not something I can do, Dad. I don't know, I can't. So from a very young age, I knew I could draw, right? Being able to sketch ideas and, you know, tell little stories and do whatever. And I would be the one that the teacher would pick to like paint the mural on the wall, right? And I knew that I could do that, but I didn't know how to get paid to do it. So it's like, okay, an artist, maybe I can be an artist. So to make a long story short, I'm walking dogs for making extra money in high school. And I come across this fellow who became a long-term friend, by the way. That's kind of how things happen in life, I guess, relationships. And he had an awesome t-shirt with this cool logo on the shirt. And I said, hey, where do you get that shirt? I'd really like to buy one. And he goes, I designed it. And I went, wow, you designed it? Really? How did you do that? He goes, oh, well, I'm a paste up artist, graphic artist, and I work in this advertising agency, and this is what we do, and we service this client and this client. And I go, sounds cool. So you got paid to draw and make that logo? And he goes, yeah. I go, what do I got to do? Where do I got to go? So he mentioned all these art colleges across Canada. And then I happen to have an uncle and aunt that lives in Toronto. And long story short, I got an interview to get on a plane and go and make a personal interview at the school with my portfolio. I had a portfolio from high school only because my high school, my little dinky high school in the country, St. Albert, well, it's an outskirt of Edmonton, but it's a small town. And St. Albert had a high school called Paul Kane, and Paul Kane was a prairie painter, a famous prairie painter who made a lot of money, and he left his estate to this high school, and only if they provided an art program for the school. So because I knew how to draw, I loved art, I went into the art program. I also did my math and sciences and all the other stuff you're supposed to do in high school, but I got to practice what I liked doing. So I had a pretty good portfolio by the time I was done high school. I found that interview at OCAD at the time in Toronto. I had the Air Force where I could get on a plane, a Hercules, because my dad had access to Hercules, and you were allowed to travel on the plane standby. I went to Edmonton Air Force Airport, got on one of these planes traveling at like 15,000 feet off the ground, very bumpy ride, all the way to Trenton, Ontario, got on a bus full of a bunch of Army brats, made my way to Toronto, got on the subway, got to my interview, got through the door, sat down, watched a bunch of people cry as they came through the doors, because obviously the school was tearing apart their portfolios, went in, nervous Nelly, going, oh my gosh, they're going to probably tear a strip off me too. Had an okay interview. They tore a strip off me anyway because they didn't like the way I painted. But somehow I got accepted into the program, and I found out 10 years later that I was in a group called Group 10 because we were the misfits, right? There wasn't something quite right about our portfolios that they didn't like, and they put us in this group, and they thought they thought we would all fail. And of course, everyone did except for me. So in Group 10, I found a way to graduate from OCAD, but I always tried to get into the commercial art side of things because I kept remembering what my friend did, which was get paid for designing a logo. And I stayed focused on it, but they wouldn't let me do what I wanted to do at the school. And I was in fine arts for 2 years. I painted nudes all day long, and with oil paints and drawings and whatnot. And I knew I was wasting my time. And I was like, what am I going to tell my mom and dad? I'm not going to get paid to be a painter. Because I looked around the room and everybody's like really good. So that's kind of how you can gear yourself up for your journey that you're taking to try and figure out what you're doing. Is how's your marks compared to everybody else? And like, how well are you doing in a program? And are you winning competitions? Are you winning, stuff at school? It's important to, especially if you become a graphic designer or art director, it's important to enter competitions. And so you can always kind of measure your abilities over others. Because this is kind of like professional sports. Okay, there's only so many players you need at a high level. Okay, so art directors, graphic designers, there's only so many of those people that are needed in the business. And then there's so many holes that are open up, and there's so many clients, and there's so many people doing things at a high level and getting paid a high level amount of money. So it's not for everyone, but if you are good, you're passionate, and you work really hard, and you love this, then you probably will do pretty well. like Andrew is going to do well because he was already passionate about it. Like you could tell by the way he did assignments that he put extra care and thinking into everything that he did. Okay, so that's kind of like the path to success. So here I am looking around the room and everyone's better painter than I am. I am not going to get paid to do this. So I got to do something else. So I took night classes to get all the things that I needed in the commercial side of the school, which was package design, graphic design, color theory, and then one class called Ad Concepts class, which was my teacher, Terry Isles. He was like an awesome teacher. In a very short period of time, I built a really good ad book, and my marks and my work was better than most in my class. So then I knew something was clicking. It's like, okay, this is for me. And out of OCAD, like I said before, 2 weeks, had a good book, got a job. Okay, and there's a whole bunch of things to talk about before that, but I won't do that. So let's get to this actual assignment, so you get an idea of what is involved in the process of how we go about solving a problem for a client. I'm going to take a short little break before I show you this, but like I said, every single project doesn't start without one of these. Now, maybe you're not a creative person, but you're a good business-minded person, or you're a good researcher, or you're a good strategist. Some really smart people have to go into writing these briefs. Sometimes they're not so smart. I'll let you know that. But at least they put all the things that matter in a brief. Maybe there wasn't any good strategic thinking in the brief, but most of the time there's supposed to be, because the agency is paying good money to a person called a strategist or a planner. And I think if you're a business-minded person, that's probably the best job in an advertising agency, is a planner. Okay, try and be a planner. And the reason why a planner is a great job is because you're not just working on one piece of business and servicing the client. You're getting to touch all pieces of business. So you're kind of like the brain of the agency for all strategies. Okay, so here's the strategy we're going to try and pursue for the client. And it's because I've done all this research that suggests that if this is the communication we deliver, we will be successful. Okay, clients like that. They pay good money for those kinds of things, those kinds of services. And sometimes in advertising today, not so much historically, today for sure, we pay, big clients pay really good money for advertising agencies to just do the research that they needed for their own communications. What is it that we need to do and position ourselves to be successful in the world? And here's all the research to support it. They'll pay good money for that, and they won't even do any creative, right? They just want to know what it is that they need to do from research, and then they'll figure out what it is that's going to be, right? Is this something they're going to bring into their in-house facilities so they save some money and get some people to work on it? Maybe they have their own PR department, okay? Instead of an advertising agency's fees, they got their own PR department, and then maybe go about their business. But what they lack, always lack, is really good researchers, right? So let's give it to the advertising agency to provide the best research, the best planning, the best strategy, but no creative, because we can't afford them, right? That goes on a lot now than in the past. Okay, so we have this brief. Some smart people put it together. We got an art director, we got a writer, and I'm staring across the table at my partner's shoes, and we're getting a brief for General Motors, and the job at hand is the first time ever that General Motors, and if, again, you weren't familiar with General Motors, it's like, so if every Hollywood movie you've ever seen had a big black SUV in it, Chevy Tahoe, a GMC Suburban, a black Cadillac CTS. So Cadillac, GMC, Chevy, they all make these big black SUVs that we drive around in North America. But in Hollywood, they're really sought after for, like, you know, driving around criminals, right? So the bad guy is always in a black SUV, meeting off in a really creepy place on the docks of some shipping yard. So that's a General Motors car, okay? So Chevy trucks, everything's Chevrolet, GMC, which stands for General Motors, right, Corporation, but it's a brand of cars and trucks itself, GMC. There's Cadillac, which is its own division. So if you're familiar with Elvis Presley and all the things that he used to drive, it was always a Cadillac convertible, etc. He had a Cadillac collection. There's the president of the United States of America back in the 60s always wanted a Cadillac. Right? Okay, it's just a status symbol in the States, a Cadillac. Okay, so that's kind of the history of General Motors. So it's a big company, been established for a long time, but they've never ever done a corporate TV commercial, right? So no communications at all about what General Motors is and represents as a company. Always the car. Okay, so if we're going to sell something from us, it's going to be a car or a division. Like Chevrolet, I think, has probably got the most presence on streaming commercials and whatnot and sports channels is a Chevrolet. It's like #1 money spend that they probably do. And then everything else underneath that. Buick might follow under there as well. So they also make Buick. And there's a whole host of new electric cars that they're pushing out now. There's the Hummer, so the Humvee that you see also in Hollywood films or on the desert in a war zone. And you see like a Humvee, like it's a really big vehicle made of metal. Now it's this fully electric, lighter version of a Hummer. And most probably people in California that have money in Los Angeles probably would love to own a fully electric Hummer. And at 1,000 horsepower, that's like a lot of truck to buy. Maybe Justin Bieber might have one of those because he likes to collect cars other than Ferraris. So there you go. So that's kind of giving you an idea what General Motors is. But here's the very first time in history we have money, a really good budget. That's an important thing on a brief. What's the budget? You can't do anything. You don't know what you're going to be working on if you don't know how much money the client has to spend. Number one, what's their target group? You guys get to do a little research for your first assignment, which is what's the target group of this company most of the time? Who are they talking to? What are you developing the communication for? You know, is it teenagers? Is it senior citizens? What is it? Then you have a bunch of facts. Okay, so facts that have been researched by someone like the strategist. But there was little to no strategic direction other than this particular goal. Communication goal for us was, here we go, we've got a corporation that doesn't have a very good image. Okay, so we've already been introduced to public relations. Is in the public's eye, General Motors is seen as a cookie cutter, affordable A to B car company, one of the bigger ones in the United States. So if I only have $14,000 and I need a car to go from A to B to get to work, I'm going to probably buy a General Motors domestic car. Ooh, that's just a terrible image to have. Like, what? No aspiration there to want to own a General Motors car if that's the only thing that people are thinking in their heads. And then they also have the fact that no one sees this as an innovator. We really do need to change that. Growing as a company, we need to make people feel like we are a part of like really important innovations in automotive transportation, right? So little do you know, but in the 90s, General Motors was the first to produce a fully electric production car. Okay, so ironic, isn't it? After all these years, now everybody's making electric cars and trying to build grids. Government's trying to make grids for electric cars to be able to transition there. That's a long time spent on burning oil and gasoline to electricity, right? Reducing our carbon emissions, et cetera. It's like now become a political problem. They have to do it. There's no other choice. But in the 90s, General Motors actually created a fully electric car, but it didn't succeed because in California, there wasn't a grid to support it. So if you were rich enough, you might have somebody install the technology they needed at your house to plug in. And the batteries didn't really last that long. So you might get about 100K out of a full charge, which isn't very practical for a car. But if you're driving around town in the city, who cares? So it just died. It just died. But they innovated it. Okay, so that kind of gives you an idea of historically, they were actually pretty good, but they really haven't done any communications. So this is the first time that they were going to do it. We had a good budget, and all we need to do is make people feel like General Motors is an innovator, not, a follower or a cookie cutter company. No matter what you think, this is what our communication goal is, very clearly. Just make them look like they're an innovator now. Okay, so out of all the things that we could possibly talk about, there was one thing buried in this little brief that the account person managed to put together, and it was somewhere on the third page in tiny copy. It said General Motors invented the airbag. Okay, and if you're not familiar with what an airbag is, it's a thing that blows out of the steering wheel when you slam into a pole or a head-on collision. And it's the first thing that stops your head and your body from hitting the steering wheel. And according to statistics, most people died from that impact, right? So you hit the steering wheel, breaks your ribs, etc. So we went, wow, that's a cool fact. And you guys are going to come up with your own facts about your social good cause, right? So what are some facts out there that could move people or could persuade people? Now, facts don't make very good creative ideas. They don't make for a good ad, but what they do is they provide good support, the truth, right? So if you've got some piece of truth that nobody else has that you can use to your advantage, and by all means, you should use it. So the truth is General Motors invented the airbag. So as a team, looking at that fact, we go, wow, that's actually pretty big. I don't think it's true. Somebody made that up. Maybe the account person made a mistake. So let's get on the phone, the old school way, get on the phone, not check out the internet and Google search it, is because we didn't have the internet at this time. Nobody corporately ever used data on the internet, okay? They may have had a server somewhere where they collect stuff, but there wasn't a place to go research it yourself. So you actually had to get up off your butt and call an engineer from General Motors. So that's what we did. And we found out that General Motors invented more than just the airbag. There's a bunch of safety stuff. And we decided that's going to make our commercial, but it's going to be the basis for it. But what's the creative way that we can make it all come together so that's entertaining, right? If we're going to interrupt hockey night in Canada on a Saturday night, and my parents are going to see something so they can finally understand what it is that I do and get paid for as an ad person. Better be good. Okay, so write lots of scripts. Rejection, get to the creative director. Here's a script. We really think this might make a great commercial. Do some collaboration and then finalize a script and say, this is it. And then we go and have a meeting with the client and we sell it. Okay, so the big difference between a good creative agency and a not so good creative agency is someone who can sell it. Okay, that wasn't my cup of tea. I wasn't really that good at it. My partner was much better at it. And you kind of rely as a team, your strengths and weaknesses, right? Now, you guys all get to do a little bit of presentation yourself next week, which is good practice, is to learn how to do that, right? Because you're selling. You're not just showing, you're selling. Always selling. You're like real estate agents in a way, because anything can get in the way of a good idea and kill it. So it's your job to make it stay alive and do everything at any cost along the way to make sure it's done. And once it's done, you still aren't finished, because you got to make sure it gets on air, because there's so many things that can stop something, visual communication, from entering mainstream media, right? So there's always this ongoing battle. Okay, so there's lots of work to get something like this on air. But when you do a good job, you get accolades for it, right? And we'll talk about awards and we'll talk about the other stuff once I show this commercial. Okay, so I'm going to play this while I'm taking a break, because I'll get 60 seconds, and then I'll come right back once it's finished. And then I might show you something that's more modern, right? A modern message from General Motors that I think is entertaining if you're aware of the pop culture around it. You may not be, but I'll show you something modern that they're doing as well, because This is something that's like 20 years ago. Okay. Okay, so hopefully it plays well. Because it's in Blackboard, it should. And let me turn up the volume because that always helps. So you can actually hear it.
What if General Motors hadn't invented the airbag? What if General Motors hadn't invented the side impact beam? The safety glass? Or the rollover test? Or the collapsible steering column? What if General Motors hadn't invented the concrete highway divider? Or, for that matter, the crash test dummy? Would you still feel safe getting into a car? As the world's largest automobile maker, we're not only committed to improving our cars, we're committed to improving all cars.
All right, there you go. Okay, so what's fun about this business? Well, shooting that commercial was definitely fun because I got to smash up 10 Buicks. Okay, now historically speaking, the Buick car is not something that any young person would want, but stereotypically, it was a car that 60-plus-year-olds, senior citizens, seem to love the Buick. So if you went to the Stratford Festival to watch a William Shakespeare play, you would see probably a majority of Buicks parked outside, especially in North America and Canada. Anyway, okay, so that's the Buick. So as a creative team, the job is to deliver a message like that with all the facts, but come up with a creative solution, right? A creative idea, a creative way to tell the story. So we're shooting a car commercial all in reverse. And then when we get to the part about the surprise, which is we don't just do this for our cars, but for all cars, is we change the footage to go forward where the guy survives the car accident, because that's kind of the idea, right? So if all these things didn't happen, then the guy probably wouldn't have walked away from the accident. Okay, so that's kind of like the idea. So that, and we were talking about promotion, right? Promoting yourself in the industry, getting noticed, like Andrew's getting noticed, being a top visual communicator. There's a lot of awards in this business, okay? And sometimes it isn't very important. It's the relationship with the client. It's actually making the needle move, showing that your visual communications had some huge effect. Maybe you've increased sales by 100% or whatever that might be. There's other reasons that make things more important. But winning an award helps move your career forward much faster. Okay, so some agencies don't spend a lot of money on entering award shows, and others, usually the bigger agencies, because they need to do things that put them in the public eye or get them on the news or have other clients see them, so they become more attractive as an agency to bring their business to. That's why we do it. Anyways, that General Motors commercial got me my third Gold Bessie. This is what a Gold Bessie looks like. It's very heavy. It's Canada's Best Advertising Awards. I have one that's used to keep a door open. So that's not that important, but it does really help. But what was important, and I'll talk a little bit more about the fun, was 10 years later, after the spot's produced, 10 years later, the car ad gets into a retrospective for all car advertising in a collection of 50 years. And my old boss Nancy Bonk was the chairman of the One Show, and she wanted to do this. She thought that a lot of car ads aren't very good, and she wanted the One Show to produce a vote for all car ads that have ever been done by all the creative directors in North America. And my commercial that Andy and I worked on at McLaren got into the top 100 best ever car ads ever made. So I was like, okay, cool, that's nice. Won something from before, but also 10 years later, I get the accolades. And of course, it's one of those things that I never remove from my portfolio, no matter how old it is. Okay, so what are all the things that could have gone wrong? So smashing up Buicks is fun. The client put the brakes on the commercial at one point in time while we're shooting this. This is 3 days of shooting, okay, to get all the footage we need to make the commercial. So I'm shooting this in Hamilton. It's a small, sort of small town, big steel town, south of Toronto. But it was a place where we could shoot economically to make it look like Americana. So you've seen there's some post work that's being done to make it look like a shot in the Bronx in New York City and make it look very, very North American. But what we really needed to worry about, and as an art director, this is what you're responsible for, is you're responsible for the way things look, right? And I told you about the writer. He's responsible for the way things are said, the content, the way the story is being told. We both collaborate about how to do that. But what the client was really worried about was the violent nature of a car crash. They didn't want to scare anybody. Okay, so as an art director, I thought, well, I don't want to scare anybody either. I want this to look very filmic. I want it to look like I want it in black and white. I want to take the edge off it. I don't want people to see this like a real car crash. I want them to see it as a piece of film and like enjoy watching it, make it entertaining to see and look at. So the director that we hired for it also thought it would be a good idea, not only all these things that we're talking about visually, but also to slow it down. So if you use slow motion footage, you'd be able to take the violent nature out of it as well. So it becomes a lot more artful. So there you go. You're collaborating with somebody that's really good and they're giving their ideas, and that's what won them the pitch. Okay, so directors pitch you their treatment of how they're going to do a commercial, and you'll have like 3 directors helping. They're trying to get their names on this thing, and they want to do it. And then there's the budget. Okay, so how much money can we afford, and what kind of production can we afford? What kind of person can we afford to shoot this thing? So all those factors come into play. But I got to say, smashing up cars, not that everyone gets to do this in the business, because how many people are doing that right now? Not very many. But we'll show you a modern commercial where you can see how much fun it would be to hang out with a celebrity for 3 days, right? So that's kind of cool. So smashing up the Buicks was fun. Hanging out with a really good production team was fun. Getting to know a stunt driver who got paid $30,000 to do all the stunts that were in that commercial. So this is holiday quality guy. So $30,000 US for 3 days and I think he performed like 4 stunts that he had to actually be in the car, but he had to orchestrate and get the team behind everything that you see in the film, right? So how did we get this car to roll so violently down this alleyway between 2 buildings without hurting anybody? Requires a lot of skill, right? So the fun was we got to drag one of these Buicks on its side with a cable attached to one of those really big diesel trucks that you'd see at the airport that hose down things like a fire truck. They're usually green in color. Rented one of those, attached it to the cables, and dragged it as fast as the thing could go, and then got a demolition expert to blow the cables underneath at a certain time when we're filming. And then once the cables were blown, the tires would grab, and then the car would spin violently, and we would get that footage that we needed. Okay, so there's lots of other stuff going on, but that was kind of the fun part of it, smashing up Buicks. Okay, so let's go off to something more modern from General Motors. And it's a Super Bowl ad. So what's a Super Bowl ad, you say? It's going to take, I don't know if I have this loaded up now. Or I don't think so. No. All right, it'll just take me a second to find it.
Ladies and gentlemen.
There you go. Ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so if you're not familiar with Dr. Evil, Mike Myers, in North America, at least, I know some of this media goes all the way around the world, but for the sake of talking about Americans, because this is where the eyeballs are mostly for General Motors, is during the Super Bowl. And if you're not familiar with what the Super Bowl is, it's America's biggest football moment every year. So if you think about Thanksgiving and what that means to Americans, this is kind of like America's second Thanksgiving other than Christmas, where a weekend in February, where it's mostly cold in half of the country anyway, is the two best NFL teams get together for winning the Super Bowl. And that whole time period of eyeballs is usually the most coveted, most expensive media buy in the States every year. So to give you an idea how much this commercial would have cost, and then how much money the media buy would have cost. So 30 seconds in the Super Bowl costs $5 million US. Okay, so if this is a minute and 30 seconds, that's 5, 10, 15 million bucks just for the media. So talk about putting the pressure on the agency to like write something that, one, the client will like, and two, Americans will probably like, and be able to sit down, watch, and get some entertainment value while they're drinking their Budweiser and eating their chicken wings and getting together with family like it's Thanksgiving. And whether you like football or not, you're there to either watch the good commercials, because they need to be good if they're spending that much money. It's entertainment, because it's an interruption that needs to be good, because if it's not good, it's going to be ignored. And what is the other reason? Oh gosh, well, I'm sure there's a host of other reasons I forgot about, but there you go. I'm just giving you an idea of how much pressure for one specific piece of media we're going to go through here. So this is just one commercial out of probably 20 that air on the Super Bowl, where all the big players are there, like Squarespace, avocados from Mexico, some big service providers like phone service, T-Mobile, Coca-Cola, Budweiser, Michelob. All these huge American corporations they want to be seen, okay, and talked about. So that's kind of what the Super Bowl is all about. Okay, so here you go. Here's a modern version of a General Motors ad, and it's all you can see the differences in the changes that have happened. So as a graphic designer, someone along the way got to redesign General Motors' corporate identity. Okay, so a graphic designer, or maybe an art director from an advertising agency, who knows who did it. My guess is it's probably a graphic designer from a design firm. Had to take the old General Motors logo, which you saw in my commercial, and make it look a more contemporary, more modern look. Okay, so they kind of took on this. It's always been, General Motors has always had blue as a corporate color, but they kind of like put a little bit of a spin on it, added a gradation. It just kind of made it a little bit more modern. And then they brought that branding and look into the commercial as well, right? The way the building is designed here, the lighting on Dr. Evil. Let's show it. Here we go.
Our takeover of General Motors is complete.
Dr. Evil, we can now use GM's Ultium platform to power our whole operation. Now we can reduce tailpipe emissions.
I'm sorry. Am I no longer Dr. Evil? I'm Dr. Good now? I didn't get the memo.
Climate change is arguably the #1 threat to the world now. Dr. Evil, you are now the #2 threat to the world.
I refuse to be number two.
We have to help the planet.
Oh, please cheer.
For my son.
Your son? I shall name him baby me.
No, his name is Kyle.
You must help save the world first.
Then you can take over the world. Okay, Fur, how about you let me do the business, all right? Hold on, I've got it. I will help save the world first, then take over the world.
She literally just said that.
Scott, you just don't get it, do you?
What? What don't I get?
You don't get it.
Oh, we're right back.
And you're never gonna get it.
You can't draw me into these
I'm not
little...
gonna get it.
You act like a child.
Here it is. You don't
I
get
am
it.
an adult. You can't push my buttons anymore.
We'll reduce our carbon footprint.
Whatever. Okay, let's get it. We're going all electric.
Everybody in!
Not you, Scott. One day you're gonna run the company, baby me.
Sorry about that. All right, so that would be pretty fun, eh? So another good reason to come into media studies. Now, if you can draw, getting paid to draw all day is kind of cool, right? So if you're good at drawing, perhaps there's a up-and-coming budding illustrator in the group that we have. By the way, if you can illustrate and you can draw the human body out of your head, you might consider storyboard artist. Okay, so you see this script and the spot that I had. This whole script has to be storyboarded before any director gets their hands on it. Okay, so each one of these frames that kind of like gives a set design, a rough look and feel, a storyboard artist draws it out first. Okay, and there's a guy named Dan Mulligan, who I think is in the links that I sent you. So in the links for today's class, in the learning in week 1, you'll see Dan Mulligan. And if you think you can do what Dan Mulligan can do, that might be a whole different journey to take. That guy has made a ton of money doing storyboards. So way back in the days, we're talking 30 years ago, Dan Mulligan had a studio inside Ogilvy and Mather, and what a sweet gig. So he got a salary to be there all the time, to be at beck and call, to draw storyboards for Ogilvy. So whatever latest and greatest American Express ads that we had that we needed to have storyboards for, whatever video content we need to build something for social media, you name it, whatever it was, he would do that. But at the same time, while he's getting paid his salary, he was allowed from some smart guy, some kind of contract that he dug up, was able to work on every other agency in town's TV storyboards if he was called on. Okay, so salary plus working independently adds up to a lot of storyboards. And let's just say he got paid for every tiny black and white image. So when you're putting a storyboard together for a client, like for the General Motors commercial, I would have had 3 foam core boards with the storyboard all laid out so that I could sell it to the client, right? So each one of those panels, if you couldn't draw it yourself, and by the way, as an art director, you do your own rough boards to begin with. But when you're going to a presentation, the agencies thinks it's worth spending the money to get proper storyboards done so that the client can really see and visualize what it is you're doing, because your abilities might be not as good as a storyboard artist, of course, right? And it takes you too much time versus storyboard artists can put it together really fast. Is each one of those frames is $60. Okay, so $60, and let's say there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 or 15 frames at $60 each in black and white. And then think about every single minute of his day filled with doing storyboards all day for other people. Now what he does, if you look at his website, he's doing commercial stuff for advertising agencies, but he no longer has an office at Ogilvy. He left that a long time ago. He's working more independently, but he's working on even bigger projects. So he's working with art directors. So art directors not just work in advertising, they sometimes branch out and work in Hollywood. Every film you ever watched has an art director in it, right? So if you look at the credits at the end, art direction, so-and-so, right? So he would work with art directors from Hollywood on scenes and storyboards for film, right? So the same with film in this film industry, you don't shoot anything without a storyboard. It's kind of like a contract. It's like, you know, for the director needs to cover this scene in order for the story to be told, and this is the order of sequence of things. Maybe they'll change the order around to like be more efficient on set, but that's the general idea. And if he does a color version, which is sometimes what we do, so in my case, we don't need one because it was a black and white film, but for this, in this case, a color version would be best probably done, is he would get more money. It would be like 120 bucks a frame, okay? So if you add up every single storyboard the guy has ever done and all the money that he's made per hour, I guess, it adds up to a lot of cash. And today he works with Hollywood, so it's probably not necessarily the money anymore because he's already made his money. I get to work with this really great talent, an art director working on the Black Panther film or whatever latest and greatest film, action film. He seems to do a lot of action films. And I get to work out these really cool scenes, but he's like an amazing illustrator and really fast. Okay, so you got to be fast, efficient, you know, a stylus with your laptop. He was one of the first to use a proper ergonomic chair because he spent so much time in front of a machine, in front of a computer, is to be efficient and get things done quickly. But he gets to work with them. And if he's not only doing that, he's also doing gaming storyboards. Okay, so gaming has taken over Hollywood. So Hollywood say is worth $25 billion. Gaming is now worth $50 billion. He's doing a lot of storyboards for gaming too. So it's like, okay, got to sit down with a gaming designer and work out a couple of panels. If the design company doesn't have their own, or they're too busy and they need someone outside of the gaming design facility, then they'll probably consider Dan Mulligan. Okay, so he's developed that kind of reputation, has his own website with all the stuff that he works on, and you can kind of see it for yourself. If you can do that, and you're that good of a drawer, illustrator, you can draw to your head, maybe it's consider that as a career choice. And you get to work with really creative people, and not hands-on maybe like I get to do, or what this creative team gets to do. So whoever the creative team was for, I'm assuming it was still McLaren, New York City, is they get to hang out with Mike Myers all day. So that's the possibility. Not for everyone. It really depends which scripts that you're working on. We don't use, it's just a stereotype to use a celebrity in an ad. You try not to use them. But if you really need one, because you've got a whole social media channel that seems to make sense, right? Like Skip the Dishes and you want Snoop Dogg, right, to do the commercials, and it's going to be international. You want a big celebrity that a lot of people know, then of course you're going to pick one because it works. It's almost a guarantee you get some kind of attention out of it. Ironically, Snoop Dogg was on the Super Bowl a couple of years ago during a halftime show. Okay, so you follow a trend. Trends are important to follow in the business because they tend to also have an important timing, right? So if you time things right, you tend to get the most success. Okay, anyway, communication-wise. All right, so I think that pretty much, I might come back to like showing you a couple of fun things, especially taking a serious matter and making it more fun, which is probably the challenge for you in your second assignment, because I told you it was like hard to do. It's probably like the hardest thing to do is like have a little bit of humor for serious subject matter. So it'll be so much easier to be serious about your issue and be graphic and beautiful and visually appealing, but it's harder to be somewhat humorous when it comes to serious matters. So the thing that if we have time, I'm going to show you, and I think it's in one of the links that I also posted, is being safe around trains. It was a campaign that was done out of Australia. And apparently their numbers were really high, like, I don't know, like in the 900 a year, people dying around trains. So either getting hit by a train or falling off the tracks or you name it. There was this really bad statistic, and Australia wanted to do something about it. So I hired an advertising agency, and they came up with this really big idea, a fun one, to get people to pay more attention about safety around the train. So there's a public service, right? And really well done, won tons of awards, etc. Okay, let's get right into our assignments. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the assignment example, tell you why this team got a good mark, and how you can maybe hopefully duplicate it, and what kind of mistakes to avoid along the way. Because for some reason, after all the years that I've been doing this assignment, there always seems to be someone that's missing something. And then they have to do it over again, or they didn't quite answer the question correctly. So I want to really make sure you answer the questions correctly by going over the details of the assignment. Okay. Oh, we don't need this big. By the way, what's in week 2 down here? So in week 2, because we spend, why is there nothing in week 2? Oh, there it is. Wonder why that didn't work. Oh, so in week 2, because we'll be spending all of our time on presenting, okay? When we present our ideas and the feedback you get, we pretty much take up all the class next week to do it. So what I kind of do to like cover off a little bit more graphic design content for you is I include this lecture in here. Now you don't have me telling it, and there's no recording of it, but it's just a bunch of slides on some successful design principles from a very international but Canadian born designer named Bruce Mao. Actually, I went to OCAD the same time I did and graduated from OCAD at the same time. So he took his graphic design sensibility. He was also an installation artist as well. And he took all that kind of good rationale and built a graphic design house here first, and then opened up studios around the world. So it became a really big design firm. It still is one today, but he's no longer involved. He got bought out by WPP. WPP seems to buy out everybody. I think Ogilvy Mather is part of the WPP corporation. Okay, so let me open this up. So here's North Face. So by the way, don't do North Face. So don't pick North Face. You can pick another cold weather fashion brand if you want. If you like Canada Goose, you can use them. They've been around a while. Azaria, you name it. Whatever you'd like to, as a team, do your research on. Perhaps there's something that you're more passionate about. Maybe you like shoes. You're into shoes and you want to like do a shoe brand like Vans, which I referenced there. Let's open up a good example, but not a perfect example of the first assignment. Okay. Sorry, I just need to take a small break. I'll be right back. I need some more water. My mouth's getting dry here from all the talking. Be back in a second. Okay. So these guys researched North Face. North Face is a outdoor clothing company, one of the probably biggest, mall representatives. So if you went to any mall in Canada, North America, you'd find a North Face fashion brand. And it's for, it's like hiking gear, not hiking gear, but hiking clothing, cold weather kind of stuff. I like Mountain Equipment Co-op better than North Face when it comes to outdoor stuff. But this team liked North Face. Okay, so what did they do well? So I guess they got most of the answers correct. At the first 4 questions correct. Their USP could have been better, but here's an important thing. If you do not put your team name up here, there's their team name, Hybrid Inc. But if you don't put your team members' names up here, then I can't give you credit, right? So if I see the name missing, I know something's up. It's like, oh, this person might have done the work on their own. And then I'll have to ask the other person to submit their own. If they need them, if they want to mark, they have to do their own work. This is important for me. Now, maybe not so much for your group because there's not that many students here, but telling me what team number it is just gets me to my sheet where I'm marking and keeping track of you. I can just easily identify the issue, the names, et cetera, et cetera. I can find you quicker in gradebook. But this is an important thing, is making sure you give me a team number reference, okay? And your credit. You need to have credit for your assignment. Same things goes for assignment 2. If on the first slide of your PowerPoint or your PDF file, you really do need to have your names there, right? And your team number. So it's like, who is going to get a mark for this beautiful presentation that you put together? Okay, so this is an easy question. The target group. I think everybody does a pretty good job of this. What you do miss out on, and I see occasionally as a mistake, is you don't offer an age range. Please include an age range. Otherwise, it's not really accurate, right? Like, say you're doing vans, and you say the target group is young people. So who's young? We're talking about babies, 8-year-olds. Age range is usually the target descriptor, right? So when you're looking for the right information, it's an age range. So make sure you do that. Current perception towards the product or service. So here's your little bit of a PR that you're looking for out there on the wild world of internet and good or bad social media. You might be able to find something about North Face. Somebody might be complaining about it. Usually it's usually there's probably more positives than there are negatives. But you never know, you might find something negative. And if it's from a large population of people or a perception that's pretty not so great, perhaps it'll open your eyes to this brand that you decided was your brand that you liked and actually support, wear clothing of, and perhaps it might shed some light on something you didn't even know about, right? That's the point of research, right? Research, like a good journalist, you're digging up stuff that's out there. What's the story? Okay, so tone of advertising. This is easy. Tone of the advertising is usually described as, is it funny? Is it serious? This team describes North Face communication as casual and relaxed, okay? And here's the most important one. This one you have to answer correctly, or I'll ask you to do it again. If you want a better mark, I'll ask you to do it again. And I usually give you a couple of hints, maybe find some reference myself for you, but don't expect me to do that kind of work. You should be doing this work yourself. But if you're really off the mark, then I might have to look for something. Now, most of the time I know what the answer is because I've worked on a lot of these big brands and I kind of understand what their selling proposition is. It's a thing that took me 5 years in this business to understand. I'm like, okay, why am I not getting this? And why is this so important to the client? Because they spend millions and millions of dollars establishing this over time. So don't pick a company that's only 2 years old. Pick something that's at least 10 years old, and you'll be able to find the answer easier. Okay, so you'll give yourself an easier time if you pick an older company, say like Walt Disney, right? You should be able to find a unique selling proposition for a brand that's that old because they've been working at it a long time and they've carved out a special place in the universe for Disney that all people everywhere in the world sort of understand what their unique selling proposition is, right? It's usually what they promise you. Okay, so if you look at any ad, so here's how you answer this question. You can do it in a few ways. You might be able to find it on Reddit. Okay, so reddit.com. If you're familiar with Reddit, it's probably like a go-to place for a lot of advertising strategists and people doing some very basic research and like kind of getting to know what's out there, what's available as far as something that could be based in truth. No guarantee that it is. Nothing is guaranteed to be truthful in the on the internet these days anyway. But that's why we need good researchers. That's why we pay good money for clients to do research for, is because they don't know what the truth is. And they want someone out there to go and find it for them. So where you're probably going to find the most truth and the most accuracy on any given brand is their website. That's an easy place to go to. Okay, so most of these corporations have websites, and they usually have a section, whether it's at the bottom of the page or somewhere more obvious. About us is generally a pretty good hint. Maybe a mission statement of what it is the company is all about. But it may not necessarily point you to their unique selling proposition. So another way to find the answer to this is you go to YouTube and you type in, I don't know, so we'll use Nike. Type in Nike commercial and you'll see what pops up. And if you're looking for anything that maybe has a bit of traction, right? Not something that has 100 views. It's like, oh, TV commercial with 5 million views. I'd say that's probably a pretty good indicator of what the quality of the message is. And if you watch maybe 2 or 3 of the messages, some from some from 2010, maybe some from 2018, something recently, and you add them all up together, you probably find a communication thread between all of them that kind of is telling you something. And what is it they're trying to tell you? It's usually what their unique selling proposition might be. Okay, so why do you even do a unique selling proposition? Why do companies care so much? Okay, so it's part of good branding exercise. So in advertising or graphic design, we kind of want good branding. So, you know, icons that are owned by certain corporations like McDonald's, you know, they own all the drawings and icons of what a Big Mac looks like or what a French fry box looks like. So I tend to like to use a metaphor of someone's backyard, you know, well fenced in, but there's like 4 or 5 pit bulls back there. And as a corporation, you own something and you don't want anyone else to play in the same place. So Nike, for example, as I've got written there, or it's not in this one, but it's in the actual assignment. They took it out to clean up their piece that they're submitting. But Nike's unique selling proposition for 30 years. Okay, so their backyard full of pit bulls that no other athletic wear company dares try to jump the fence and share is a message that's the same as theirs. Okay, so it's just really dumb to walk into the minefield of a place where someone's spent billions of dollars carving out a message that they own. Because if you do that, you will waste millions of dollars putting together communications for something, because everyone that sees it and hears it may not see your logo, but they hear the communication and they go, oh, that, yeah, I know that. That's Nike's message, right? Like, you wouldn't put "just do it," their tagline, on your communications, right? So that's how important a unique selling proposition is. It's kind of what they own, what they promise you as a corporation. If you buy from me, if you use my products from me, this is kind of what it represents and what you probably like it for. Okay, so for Nike, just do it. I might actually show you one of those commercials, because I'm sure we'll have time. Yeah, we'll have time, I'm sure. But I want to get through the assignments before I actually show any of that kind of stuff. But just so you understand, so just do it is a tagline written by, most likely, a writer. Okay, so not necessarily me, the art director, even though I can write. Everyone can write. I may help the writer establish the writing. Maybe we both sat down and jammed out taglines 30 years ago, and one of us was responsible for writing the tagline for Nike, "Just do it." Now, "just do it" is a creative person's expression of the unique selling proposition. It's not necessarily what was in the unique selling proposition that's in this brief that you get as a creative person. It can be pretty dull, right? The unique selling proposition can be pretty straightforward. So Nike's, on their document from very early on in time, was basically, if you were an athlete, or sorry, if you have a body, you have a physical body, whether it's with one arm, two arms, no arms, if you have a body, you can aspire to be an athlete in some way or form. Unless you're like a quadriplegic or something like that. It's like the exaggeration is there. It's just, it's the mindset of having a body. You have the ability to be an athlete. Okay, so that's very aspirational in a way. And what best describes that is the creative person's expression of what that is, which is basically someone writing, "just do it." They think that's a big enough of a rally cry to make way more interesting from word standpoint than if you can imagine seeing a poster in the store of Nike, some new Nike shoe, and at the bottom of it says, if you have a body, you can be an athlete, as their slogan. It's not very good, is it? So in this case, in North Face's answer, they have "never stop exploring," but that's their tagline. That's not necessarily the unique selling proposition. So what did they write here? They write that integrates lifestyle and style, and encourages the practice of outdoor exploring. Okay, so getting out there in the great outdoors, wherever it is kind of what they sell. Now, it doesn't sound very creative, but that's what they based all of their communications on from a very early start. Now, I'm pretty sure there's someone out there that does the exact same thing, like is it Alteryx? Okay. There's a couple other brands that kind of like are in the same backyard, and it's hard to distinguish one over the other. And well, they maybe need to do a better job of defining their unique selling proposition. Okay, and then you find a product that they make to support the selling proposition, right? So what is it that, what kind of product supports that position, right? Is it a shoe? What is it? Okay. So there you go. So that's how you best answer that, is what's a unique selling proposition. So here's another example. So don't use Dove because I'm giving you the answer to Dove. So Dove as a corporation for 30 years, their unique selling proposition has always been, in every single communication from 30 years ago, has been the same, which is real beauty is their unique selling proposition. So anything that they do always supports real beauty, not fake beauty, not Photoshop beauty, not like fake people. It's always real people, real women celebrating their inner beauty, not the outer beauty, even though they do focus on some of that, like having really nice skin because you're using a moisturizer that has low acidity and pH value, et cetera, et cetera. But for the very beginning of all time, they're the first to do that. Now, there's been 100 different beauty products out there and companies that have borrowed from their unique selling proposition and copied it, but no one's really known in the world as well as Dove is for kind of carving out that space with their pit bulls in their backyard. Okay, but Sephora, as an example, copies them. You know, they tend to try and be really inclusive of all women, all colors, all everything. It's just Dove's doing it for 30 years. Okay, so it's not new. But there you go. That's a unique selling proposition. That's what you're looking for. Okay, so let's move on to part B. Part B is the fun part. You get to be a graphic designer. Woohoo. What did this team not do well here? Well, this is a visual business, right? So how do you become the 15th best visual communicator? Is actually show some visuals. So they love Baskin-Robbins as a logo. Actually never gave Baskin-Robbins much credit for their logo. And when they brought this up and wrote the rationale for why they like Baskin-Robbins, I went, wait a second. And the next time I drove by a Baskin-Robbins, I said, oh, you're right. BR has the number 31 in it. I'd never, ever seen it before. How daft. I'm an art director and I've never seen what this logo represents. Maybe because I don't like Baskin-Robbins ice cream. I don't know. Anyways, their promise is to always have 31 flavors available every single day. And that's what they're all about. Okay, variety. So that's, I'd say their unique selling proposition is about selling variety. So that's what you're looking for. Anyways, they could have dropped in a logo. So if you are doing part B and you want a good mark, drop the logo that you love so much. I mean, really, if it's Jordan and you like the Jordan logo, throw it in there. I want to see it. Why do you think it's good? Well, I get to see it visually, but then you get to write about it, right? Make sure you have a good rationale. So let's get to the fun part here. So they call themselves hybrid by definition. And why did they call themselves hybrid? By combining two different elements. The zodiac sign of Pisces and Gemini. Our two elements of water and air signs can be seen in our brand logo. The logo is shaped as an H for hybrid ink, which can be seen with the two fishes as the vertical pillars and the wave line crossing horizontally, completing the format of the letter. The fish symbols represents the Pisces zodiac sign and completes the Gemini zodiac sign by connecting with the vertical lines with the top and bottom lines of the symbol. You can see the perfect balance of both signs, and the fusion of both signs makes sense with our identity and flows with our team name. So what they didn't do very well here is write the rationale for why is this appealing to a client, right? So hybrid is a positive message in a word, but other than their two birth signs and the bringing the two elements together, how does that relate to, I don't know, like good communications or an advantage over another advertising agency? What is it you will deliver? right? Is it, are you good at combining two different disciplines in the advertising and graphic design world that make you better than anyone else? So make sure you write a good rationale for the design, not just to design for the sake of design. That's what Bruce Mau's theory is for good graphic design, is to have good rationale behind it. That's what clients pay you big money, is they like to have some kind of meaning behind things, right? They need to have, even a good artist that you see in a show, like really abstract artist, they usually write some kind of like spiritual or psychological reasoning behind their expression of art. You know, there's all kinds of ways to describe it, even if it's complete BS. And let me tell you, some agencies, the way they write their descriptions of what they do on their websites is really BS. but clients eat it up. Okay, if they don't understand it, they think it's mysterious and they like it. So that's what separates the small fish from the big fish, so to speak, is good rationale writing. Okay, try and figure out a good rationale. Now, my favorite advertising agency's name, and you don't have to be literal, like you don't have to put a communication tower with like signals coming out of the top and you do it in a retro way. Like you don't need to be that literal about being a communications and design firm. For example, my favorite agency name out of LA is called 72 and Sunny. Now, who wouldn't want to work there? What the rationale would be, I don't know. Maybe it's more abstract, right? So a pleasant environment. So when you come here, not only as an employee, but as a client, you'll find comfort in confidence in what it is that we do here, what communication disciplines we offer. I don't know. You make it up. So what was the criticism on the design? Well, I didn't quite get the air thing. I certainly got the Pisces thing. Maybe what they didn't need was this loop thing at the top and the bottom. It's like too complicated. And maybe some kind of thing that wrapped in between the fish that represented air that kind of made the H more complete. Yeah, they needed something a little bit more defined. And what they're missing is hybrid ink, right? Right here, hybrid ink should be written out. Yes, you could use this as your graphic symbol on your, I don't know, your Instagram feed, where you've got a circle and it's small and you've got these two fishes that make an H. I get it. That's what you would use it for. And then in the writing at the bottom of your Instagram page, you'd probably see hybrid ink, now featuring work from Coca-Cola. You know, that's how they'd probably promoting themselves. But you would see in an actual brand representation on a website or on a business card, you would see hybrid ink, find a typeface that would fit, you know, it would be a good complement to this logo. Now, don't let this scare you off because you're not a graphic designer. So you find someone in your team that might have maybe better drawing skills. You can get away with a sketch. You don't have to comp something up in a program, but you can get away with a sketch. But as long as the sketch has a good idea behind it, a good creative idea, not just your acronym of your name. And I say this specifically here in the instructions, please do not provide me an acronym unless there's a creative reason for it. So for example, someone is from the West and someone's from the East of a city, and one person's name is Emily and the other person's name is Weston, and you're going to call yourself East-West because you want to give the most broad spectrum of good research from both ends of the city, providing you with the best communication services, the most diverse of a city, because sometimes diversity in a city comes from how it's geographically laid out. Especially here in Toronto, we have a dynamic of West Enders and we have a dynamic of East Enders. But having a perspective of both people's kinds of ways of thinking is a good an advantage over someone else if you're developing a communications design firm. You offer the best of both worlds, for example. So you can write whatever you want there that makes a good rationale for your idea. So that's what will get you a good mark there. What's that? So at the beginning of the assignment right here, because this wasn't on this assignment before, but it's on there now. Fruit fly season is right here on the actual assignment. When you open it up, it'll say only need to submit one from the team, one submission from the team. So if you've got two people's names on here, two people don't need to submit it in Gradebook. Only one person needs to. Okay, just as a heads up. Right? Not everybody needs to submit it, but because there's not a lot of people in this class, it probably doesn't matter. Submit it if you want. But when you've got 4 people on a team, you can see how that becomes an advantage. It's like, oh, okay, one person is going to take responsibility to make sure that this gets submitted in Gradebook, and then everybody gets the same mark. Okay, so is there any questions about the first assignment? This is where I'll open up the floor. Anybody? All clear? Awesome, thank you. Okay, so I think it's pretty clear. I've gone over this in pretty good detail. And you've got the recording if you need to go back. Great. So let's close this up and go on to the more interesting assignment. I'd say it's probably a lot harder. Let's go to, where is example? This should not be down here. That is better order. So let's take a look at what this team entered for their assignment 2. And I think that's probably big enough. There we go. Okay, so what did they pick? So team 6, as you can see down here, thank you very much, team, for putting in your team number and your 2 names that get credit for this thing. You both get the same mark. Awesome. They picked 60, which is Earth Hour, okay, developed by the World Wildlife Fund. Not a bad organization. I worked on Wildlife Fund when I was at Ogilvy and Mather in Toronto. Did a really nice campaign for migratory birds and turning the lights off during migratory season, which is, so it's like 2 weeks of the year. If that's only 2 weeks of the year that you could try at spring and in winter, or spring and fall, is there's 2 times a year where migratory birds come through. And if you could do anything for the birds, is turn off as many lights as you can at night so that these birds don't die of exhaustion getting caught up in the lights in the city. Okay, now I know that's a tall ask to order for a big building that has security issues, but there's probably ways to deal with it. Were we successful? Not very, but I got some really good communications out of it and portfolio pieces and won some awards. What I wished for was to actually have done, I don't know, maybe done a better, figured out a better way for long term when it came to the design of buildings, is to figure out a way to put some kind of polarization in the glass so that the company could still have a light on for security reasons. But at night, the polarization of the glass could dim the light so that it wouldn't exhaust all these birds where they fall to their death. Basically, every morning, 10,000 birds in the city floor are picked up every morning before you even get to work because they got caught up in the lights circling around and die from exhaustion and fall to the ground. These beautiful little creatures that are just trying to get their way from South America to North America to a nesting site. All right. Anyway, so let's talk about Earth Hour. So what do you do as a group, as a team? So next week, when you come up and it's your turn to present, what you really want to do is you want to sell us on why. Okay, so why did you pick Earth Hour? Why is this important to you? Now, I'm not going to go over every slide. I'm just going to go over the bits and most important pieces that you need to have in order to get a good mark. Is, of course, there's the slides. Okay, so how you put together your slides and what they look like, that can affect your mark. So there's no specific rubric. This is like a very organic process for me. It's basically what I deem good and what I deem not so good is an organic thing. It's like, okay, well, they had a really good presentation and they were outstanding in the selling part. But when it came down to the ideas and the execution of the ideas, they weren't so good. So it kind of evens out. So their mark might change depending on what else somebody's presented to me. Okay, now if you knock it out of the park, then I guess the best outcome would be maybe you are the next standard to put in as an example for people, other students to follow, right? Your names will be up there in lights for, I don't know, maybe say 300 students get to see your name. I don't know. How long will this one stick around for before the next one boots it out of its place? Right. Okay, so you're coming up here and you're selling us. Okay, so it needs to have some good sell, some good facts about, do some good research about why we should care. Okay, so what are the facts out there? So if you were dealing with food waste, for example, you think food waste in the world has a huge impact on environmental change. If we all didn't waste so much food, we would reduce our carbon emissions by 9% globally. Good statistic. Okay, that's all of a sudden making food waste more important to me. I didn't really know that. I didn't know we could have that much change. Now, in the sake of this team, Earth Hour, if we just shut off our lights for an hour on Earth Day or Earth Hour, whichever day it is, I think it's March something, March 28th, March 29th. If we all did that around the world, then we would have a huge impact on our carbon footprint. Okay, so anything we can do, and if this is everything everyone can participate in the world, they thought it was an important issue and an important cause to continue supporting and getting the word out, building awareness for the day. But if it's for something else, you need to figure out what that is and why. So there's a million charities out there in the world. So you need to tell us what it is that you think this charity does that's more important than someone else, and why we should give you our money if you're looking for donations at all, or why we should act, a call to action. Why should we act on this now? Why is it so important? Come up with those tidbits and you have a pretty good start of your presentation and your campaign. Okay, so moving through all those slides, you know, giving us an example of what it looks like when someone's participating in Earth Hour. Probably could do better than this, Sydney. Just turning out this Eiffel Tower is probably not enough, but at least they're participating in some way or form. Okay, so here's what everybody has to have, their mind map. After you've done the sell and you've got some good facts about why we should care, it's show your mind map exploration. Okay, so don't just, okay, you stick Earth Hour, you stick World Wildlife Fund, or whatever it is you pick, put your in here as your charity, or maybe it's that's the subject matter, you know, suicide or mental illness. It's not, you're not just doing research about the corporation or the organization, the charity. It's not just an exercise of here's all the things that they do. Now, let's not get that wrong. This is an exploration of idea development. Okay, so maybe one side of the equation for your mind map may be a little bit about what they do, And then on the other side, it'd be more about what are all the solutions to solving the problem. And somewhere buried in this mind map, it says that people may be hesitant on participating in Earth Hour because they are afraid to turn their lights off. So we're going to focus our campaign on not being afraid of the dark. That's our strategic angle. Okay. Now they may have discovered something else in their exploration of their ideas. And this is basically, when you're doing a mind map, it's just basically a place to organize all your thoughts. That's all. And when you organize your thoughts, it helps you be creative because it might lead to a new area, a new idea, right? So, and when you share it with one of your teammates, depending on what it is you built in the mind map, and you exchange mind maps to each other, you might come across something that you never thought of, and it might lead to a new, fresh area. So check out mind map readings, like do some reading. I'll show you where that is here. If you don't really understand what a mind map is, you can read this, okay? This is a creative person's exploration of their mind map and what and how it works, you know, through association. One thing leads to another, and it gets you down a path, okay? So this path of creativity was all about Best Buy and coming up with a fresh way to look at a promotion for Christmas time, okay? And so you can read all about that. This is what a good mind map looks like, okay? Now, it doesn't have to look like this, but it has a whole lot of different ways of thinking about global warming, right? You know, so if we all just got off our butts, maybe we would put a big, you know, have a huge impact on climate change, okay? So that's what a mind map should look like. So let's go back to the actual presentation. Okay. And let's go to the mind map. Okay, drawings is next. Okay, so each team member needs to submit some sketches. Please, please, this is the fun part, right? So in the assignment 2, the second page, you'll have a template there, and it's going to basically be vertical thumbnail areas to sketch in. Now, try and pick vertical, not turn it sideways and do horizontal, because when you're doing a thumbnail, it helps you lay out what your poster might have as far as content goes, right? So you know what you're looking for, what kind of shape of things would fit vertically the best, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to put you in a box, but you can think as openly as you'd like about the idea, but it kind of helps you kind of get ready for what's to come, right? Because that's the discipline, is all the things you want to put in need to fit this vertical poster, and the more stuff you put in, the worse it gets. It needs to be a really stripped down, simplified thought. So you can have multiple posters that do a little bit of something different in each one, but the overall thought, the call to action is always the same, right? That's what makes it a campaign. All right, so you can see this person's drawing abilities are actually pretty good. This is about as good as it needs to be when if you're an art director in the ad business, is just being able to sketch out an idea clear enough that I actually understand it. So if I'm a creative director and you've got your ideas on the wall, they're up there, and I walk by and I say, hey, that's an interesting idea. I think you should pursue that strategic direction and do more thinking in it. This may not be the right one, but do more in it. For example, don't be afraid of the dark was something that kind of caught both team members as a strong strategic place to go in, but how do we do it in a more entertaining way or inviting way when we're actually executing the idea? And then, of course, they wanted to change people's perception of turning the lights out. Well, shouldn't be a scary thing. It should be a fun thing to do. Okay, so you imagine all the things that you could do when you celebrate Earth Hour. Okay, this is just one way. Another way could probably be, you know, creating a romantic situation, right? So Earth Hour doesn't have to be you know, a kid thing either. It could be something else. But they wanted to focus on taking the fright out of darkness and making it a fun thing. So shadows, right? Don't be afraid of the dark. And they also did some nice art direction. It looks really clean. They found illustrations from a lot of different places, and they mocked things up in Photoshop. They made the typeface loose because it's all kind of drawn and feels kind of you know, organic and easy and receptive or inviting and not threatening at all. So there's a lot of good things all happening at once, but don't be intimidated by it. You can get away with a sketch and some good type as long as you have the logo. Now, the big criticism for me on their executions, and I'll show you in a second, and they did 2. You can do 3 to make a campaign if you want, but they finished at 2. They could have used a flashlight instead of a lamp, so that, you know, they're still doing shadow puppets with different light sources, you know, and you need to always use a lamp. And here's what they look like in transit shelter. Okay, so why a transit shelter? Transit shelter because charities use transit shelters a lot because they get free media. And it's a discipline that I think everybody needs to always be able to do well. It's a discipline that helps make you simplify your message so you're not too complicated. You don't like get to have a video and a story to tell every single detail of your thing. Your creative idea needs to be able to communicate simply in a print poster. If you can't communicate your idea in a print poster, then maybe your idea is too complicated. Okay, you need to kind of like rethink it. It just helps you get to a core idea, which for them was don't be afraid of the dark, right? So Earth Hour. Here's the call to action that I talk about, right? Every poster should have a call to action, and then who's paying for this ad? So wwf.ca gives you a location, maybe today's methods of making it easier for you to find or get more information might be a QR code, but website's probably good enough if it's easy, it's short enough to like remember. What they didn't do very well here is that their logos are way too small. So if you were walking by this transit shelter and you saw this in your city, you might be attracted to the, you know, the message might be fun and you might be attracted to reading it. But who's it for? We know it's for Earth Hour. And if you don't know what Earth Hour is this a legitimate thing that they're talking about? Well, the logos usually help legitimize any communication. Okay, so it's World Wildlife Fund, so we need a bigger panda bear. And no client on earth would ever approve this ad if it was this small. So making these things bigger, I don't see 60 anywhere. It's just kind of hard. So if I was walking by this board, this would be too small. Okay, so that was the criticism. And of course I said, well, you could have changed light sources. Why does it have to always be a lantern? Well, we couldn't find a flashlight, the right angle and stuff. And I go, okay, fine, I understand. But thank you for developing 2 beautifully art-directed posters that it has a really simple message, and I understand it completely, and it makes a nice standard for the class to follow. Okay, and with everything, put a period at the end. If you don't have something strategically to add at the end of your slide presentation, then a simple thank you will do, right? Because you just spent 20 minutes or 10 minutes with the class is probably a polite thing to just say thank you, and that makes for a good presentation. Okay, any questions? I think we've run out of time here. Everybody clear about what we're delivering in assignment 2? I got a yap. Okay, great. Anybody else? All clear?
Yes, I wonder about the stretch, about a stretch that we have to do. Can I know the purpose of doing it? Like
Sorry,
what you do.
Repeat that again. What's the question?
I want to know why we need to draw a stretch first, like a stretch, vertical stretch.
Oh, a sketch. You mean?
Oh, so sorry.
This here, right? A sketch.
Yes.
Why do you have to do that?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, okay. So whenever I'm working on an assignment, a project, with my partner. We sketch out ideas because it's part of the creative process. Okay, so it kind of shows us, one, it's kind of fun to be able to see the level of, like, you know, what your drawing skills are, showing off a little bit at the same time. If it's just stickman and your ability to draw is much less than someone else, we don't care, but it's entertaining to look at. What it does do for me is I get to see your process and what other things you thought of other than the one that you landed up on. So you may like end up on this as final execution, but I can see that there might have been a better idea hidden somewhere else that I could have said, hey, you know what, I know why you ended up on this, but this area number 2 actually was pretty good. That could have made a good campaign. Or I might see wherever you ended up might not be as good as another area. So I have to like kind of like provide you some different feedback based on other sketches. It also gets to show what each person's contribution is. So one team member, you know, their ideas might have been a little bit better than the other team members. It depends. But it's part of the creative process. It just kind of helps you stay loose. And when you're sketching, you don't spend a lot of time with stuff, right? Like comping up stuff, like if you were only doing comps like this and you developed every idea as a comp, it takes up too much time, and your best ideas usually come up the last minute. They're not usually the first thing that pops into your head. And it's just part of the creative process. It really helps me show how you thought of things, like from the mind map to what you produced as a sketch and an idea and a thought. What was your simplest execution? What was your most complicated one? And where did you end up as a team from all the thinking? It shows me how much thinking that you've done. That's all. And it's part of the creative process. So hopefully I answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, good. Okay. Anybody else before we go? No? Awesome. Okay, good. Well, it seems like you've got enough to work on. Good luck with your teammate. And by all means, if you have any other questions, you can send me a course message. And if you don't know how to do that, it's right up here. Press messages, press the plus button over here, and then type in Blaine. You can even send me an email too, but that's kind of a waste of time. I'm very diligent about course messages. It's because I've got a lot of courses and it helps keep me very organized. And when you send me a message here, I should answer you within 24 hours or faster. Awesome. Okay, team, great. Good luck sinking your teeth into those assignments. And the first assignment, as I said, is due Sunday night at 11 p.m. Okay, hopefully you can get through it in like an hour. It usually doesn't take anybody more than a half an hour to answer the 4 questions. The logo is probably what you would spend most of your time on, going back and forth with your teammate. It's like, oh, I'd like to name this, or I'd like to name that. Here's some sketches. What do you think's our best idea? And let's build some rationale. Okay, who's going to build the file? Let's put this together. And maybe we'll submit it early. We don't need to wait until Sunday at 11. Whenever you decide. Okay, so good luck with that. Thanks for today. Thanks for listening. And I can't wait to see your presentations next week. Let's stop the recording. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Yes, happy weekend. It's Friday.